This video is sponsored by Manscaped, and let me tell you, this summer heat is getting to me. As a rather hairy individual, I find that around this time of the year, I need to shed this old winter coat so I don't risk dying of heat stroke. And thankfully, that's where today's sponsor comes to my rescue. Manscaped offers dozens of products that can help you stay groomed and looking fresh. And right in time for summer, they've dropped the special edition Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. When I opened this box, I couldn't help but go sheesh, because this sleek little beauty comes with 3 interchangeable heads, so you can get the shave that's right for you. This bad boy also sports the usual skin-safe technology Manscaped is known for, as well as, of course, being waterproof. On top of that, it has this little upgraded light for those of you that like to shave in the dark, like Batman or something. So if you want to grab this little gadget or any others from Manscaped, you can use code Cosmonaut to get 20% off plus free international shipping at manscaped.com/Cosmonaut. Again, in case you missed it, that's 20% off plus free international shipping when you go to manscaped.com/Cosmonaut and use code Cosmonaut at checkout.
Cosmonaut Quickie!
So I saw Deadpool 3, and I'll be honest, I went in with low expectations. Despite the fact that I'm apparently Mr. X-Men now, it's no secret that I've never loved the Deadpool movies. It's more like I tolerated them, but I did find on my last watch through of the X-Men movies that my newfound love for the Merry Mutants has warmed me up to the idea of Deadpool a little more. Also, reading Deadpool's appearances in modern comics has made me realize that he's not nearly as annoying or cringe as the movies may lead me to believe. When Deadpool is written well, he comes across as more like a Looney Tunes character who has to interact with normal people. So yeah, maybe he's grown on me a little bit. But even so, I'll say the trailers for this movie did not instill me with a lot of confidence. Another colorless MCU movie set in a gray Dragon Ball wasteland with cringe humor and a tired phoning it in Hugh Jackman. I was simply not excited. But surprisingly, I kinda liked it. In a lot of ways, this does feel like the Deadpool movie that was always supposed to exist. One of the most distracting things about Deadpool 1 and 2 was the budget. And while there were plenty of jokes about it, it always felt like Deadpool was forced to work with the scraps of the Marvel cinematic fringe. And that's not the case here. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but this movie has a lot of shit in it. And it's easy to say that the cameos and stuff are all this movie has to offer, and yeah, you're right. I do think it's easy not to like this movie, and I myself am trying to figure out why I even liked it. Because I know a lot of fucking crayon munchers are going to look at people critiquing this movie and say, let people have fun. Why don't you want me to have fun in my superhero movie? Like, bro, shut the fuck up. Nobody's stopping you from having fun. In fact, we are letting you have fun. No one stopped you at the door and said, don't go watch this movie. You're not allowed to have fun. You have to accept that it's perfectly fine to criticize a movie, even if you liked it. I like this movie, but I don't think it's perfect, and I fully understand why other people wouldn't like it. Alternatively, people saying this is the worst movie of the year are a little crazy to me. Did we forget that Madam Web came out this year? But I've also seen some critics call this film soul-crushing. To me, when I think of a soul-crushing comic book movie, I think about how I felt watching the trailer for the new Captain America movie. That trailer made me feel nothing. When I think of soul crushing, I think about Secret Invasion, a show that I watched on purpose. I'm not going to say I'm enlightened because I'm one of the only people who watched this garbage, but I will say I've looked into the abyss, and it looked back, and it laughed at me. I've seen a lot of people compare Deadpool 3 to No Way Home, and I think that's a very interesting comparison, because on paper, they're nothing alike, aside from having a bunch of cameos, and that being kind of important to the plot. However, it is fun to think about these two approaches to this kind of movie. A movie that's more of a theme park ride than an actual focused film. But it is worth noting that this film does manage to make No Way Home look significantly better. Because while No Way Home is a movie that I liked and had a lot of fun with, every subsequent rewatch kind of dulled the experience a bit. All of the scenes where you're supposed to clap in the theater ring very hollow when you're watching them at home. But at the same time, the emotional highs and Peter's story overall are very effective, and I think it's one of the stronger Spider-Man narratives in film, period. Where No Way Home is a genuine love letter to Spider-Man, Deadpool 3 is taking the modern MCU formula and making fun of it while still trying to copy it. On one hand, I could see why someone would be bothered by this hypocrisy. A film trying to copy the very thing it's making fun of. But to me, that's kind of the definition of a parody. And it is fair to call this a parody of the MCU formula. I'm definitely not a Sean Levy fan, but I do think this movie succeeds at what it's setting out to accomplish. But it does stumble in a lot of areas. The emotional beats of this movie didn't really do it for me because we've been following a Deadpool across 3 movies whose only motivation has been, I gotta do this for my hot girlfriend. But now we have a Wolverine who's mostly a new character who isn't really anything like the other Wolverines that we've seen on screen, and he's kind of an amalgamation of all of them. And when we finally do learn what his deal is, it's kind of not that interesting because his backstory is the least interesting backstory for any Wolverine we've ever met across all of pop culture. I think he definitely needed a more tragic backstory, or we needed to see a flashback for this to hit as hard. But I will say I did expect Hugh Jackman to phone it in. He looked very bored in the trailers, but I think he was fine in the actual movie. But also we do have a main villain in this film that hasn't been in any other movie, and I do think she has some very inconsistent motivations. I'm a big Cassandra Nova fan. There's dozens of us out there. And I went into this knowing that this is going to be something a little different than what I expect. And I was fine with that. But despite that, I feel like the writers didn't really know how to make this weird, complex character work in a movie that isn't really focused that much on her. I genuinely believe that you can't really make Cassandra Nova work in a movie that doesn't have Charles Xavier in it. I was trying to take myself out of the movie a little bit and try to imagine what it would be like if I was watching this without knowing who she was. And I can't imagine I would like the movie that much. It's honestly kind of a weird decision to make her the main villain of the third Deadpool movie. This is really not a character that I would associate with Deadpool at all. But I will say, I do think the irony poisoning that this movie takes part in does stop halfway through, and this turns into a celebration of the Fox era of Marvel, and really any Marvel movie that was off on the outskirts. The movies that Disney was trying to pretend don't exist. The ones that sometimes don't make it to Disney+, which is something I didn't expect. It would have been very easy to just shit on Fox for not making movies as good as Sony or Disney, but it's very apparent that this is intended to be a send-off to that era. The plot literally revolves around the MCU taking everything that isn't a part of the MCU and throwing it in the trash to be forgotten. And I do think that's a fun idea. And as someone who has reverence for the old early 2000s Marvel movies, I kind of appreciated this, because even if most of them are bad, I think there's value in a corny, bad superhero movie. And it is nice to see that this movie is allowed to formally say goodbye to this era of superhero films, because if they didn't, Disney would have happily pushed all of it under the rug with no intention of bringing it up ever again. And don't get me wrong, in a lot of ways, this is very similar to what you'd get from a standard MCU movie nowadays. Visually, there's not a lot going on here. It is indeed mostly set in the bland Dragon Ball wasteland. But I will say that outside of a couple awkward CGI Hugh Jackmans here and there, the effects are also a little better than they've been in recent MCU outings. Not enough people praise the fact that CGI works so well and seamlessly with Deadpool himself. I don't know why this character model takes CGI so much better than any other superhero, but it does add to the effect of making him a Looney Tunes character like I mentioned before. Now I will say, I do think the main dividing factor of this film will be the humor. A lot of the jokes didn't make me laugh, but some did. I did get some nose snorts, I got some light chuckles, but the main jokes in this are less of the "you look like if balls fucked my balls and shit on my balls," but they're more of the "hey, what if a man had gay sex? Wouldn't that be crazy?" The humor in this film will not be for everybody. Personally, I think the humor is about on the same level as the other Deadpool movies. I've seen a few people say that they thought the other two were funny and this one isn't. I don't know what to tell you. I think you just forgot what was in those movies, because this is the same kind of humor. It's exactly the same. I've said this in the previous Deadpool reviews, but the kind of jokes I like in these movies aren't really the ones that get highlighted very often. I'd say that first and foremost, this is a comedy film, and if you don't really vibe with the comedy, you're not gonna like it, and that's fine. I didn't vibe with the comedy of Thor: Love and Thunder, and as such, I did not like that movie very much. But here, I did laugh at least a few times. And there are a few things that make this stand out from your standard MCU fare. I think the music is pretty good here. I'm not really even talking about the licensed tracks, even though I think those are integrated very well too. But licensed music in a superhero movie ain't really that big a deal anymore. The actual score of this film is pretty fucking good, and that's not the case with most superhero movies nowadays. I'm like the only person who even bothers to talk about the score, but it's one of the most effective ways to get an audience engaged with a film, and I found it to be pretty good here. It managed to trick me into caring about Deadpool and Logan's character arcs a little bit more, and it accentuated a lot of the aforementioned big theme park moments. But of course, one of the main reasons to watch a Deadpool movie is the action. Even before, when I wasn't a big fan of the series, I praised the action scenes. It's no secret that the MCU doesn't really try very hard when it comes to action. I can name on one hand how many fight scenes I actually love in the MCU. Wait, can I? 1, 2, 3. Damn, that's a lot less than I thought, actually. I see the Deadpool movies as action schlock with a little bit of wacky fourth wall breaking humor. The second half of that doesn't do as much for me anymore, but the action's always been pretty fun in this series. I enjoy the over-the-top, cartoony aspect of it all. And really, this isn't a character or movie that's taking anything seriously, and while that does hurt the emotional moments and the story beats, it helps the fun, blockbuster popcorn sequences shine. When this movie does do cameos, it feels a little less manipulative than when another movie does them. Like when Eternals tries to tell me, guess what guys, Bing Bong the Destroyer will be in the next one. I'm like, what? Why do you think I'd care about that? Leave me alone. But in Deadpool, it's more like they're saying, hey, you like this character, right? Yeah, so do I.
And you know, it also helps that the cameos have a purpose in the plot, and they do tie into the overall theme of the film.
And it just feels a little more genuine. But again, maybe that's because I genuinely enjoy this era of superhero movies. And it is kind of fitting because I think the goal here is for Deadpool to be a part of the MCU. And a lot of it does feel like an MCU movie. But that comes with the flaws as well as the benefits. Deadpool gets a higher budget and gets flashier action scenes and more characters to joke around with, but it also comes coupled with the MCU's uninspired visuals and janky pacing. I don't care how many times Deadpool tells me that the movie's too long. It's a cute attempt, but it doesn't really make it any better. Overall, while this isn't going to be one of the best that the MCU has to offer, I do think it's a little higher on the ladder just because it offers something a little different. But if you don't really like the Deadpool movies, don't walk into it thinking it's going to change your mind. And I've said this before, but you might not like Ryan Reynolds. You might think he's annoying. Personally, that's how I feel about him. But it is undeniable that he's extremely passionate about this character. He loves doing this, and he fought tooth and nail to make this franchise happen. He really wanted to play an accurate version of this character, and we weren't going to have Deadpool movies until he fought for them. You may find him insufferable. I know I do. But I can't hate someone who's doing it for the love of the character. You can say a lot of things about Ryan Reynolds, but you can't say he's phoning it in. And honestly, I gotta respect that to some degree. This movie's stupid and it's annoying, but I thought it was pretty fun. I don't know about you, but that sounds just about right for a Deadpool movie if you ask me. So I'm gonna go ahead and give Deadpool 3 the MCU standard of 7 out of 10.